Our first look at what the 2019 Michigan football roster may look like. Next on Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Clark. Waits for it. Hit. Caught.
This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison.
Brady gets terrific. Throws it. Get it. Touchdown. Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him. And a leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Sack. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
Win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue. I'm Steve Deace. Welcome to another episode of Michigan Podcast. Joining us a little bit later, our good friend Michael Spath from WTKA. We're going to talk tons of hoops. Big week for Michigan basketball this week at Minnesota. And then Sparty comes calling on national television on Sunday. We'll break all of that down with Michael Spath a little bit later on. But we begin by taking another early look at the upcoming football season. So we've put together for this week's episode an early projection. We're going to go position group by position group. Here are the players we believe have the best chance of making up the 2019 Michigan football roster when they open camp at the end of July. At least this is what we believe as things sit right now. Let's begin by looking at the quarterback position. We believe there will be 4 scholarship quarterbacks on the roster when camp opens. And here you have Shay Patterson, Dylan McCaffrey, Joe Milton, and Cade McNamara. And that's pretty much your ideal quarterback room. I mean, in Shay Patterson, you have a proven star who's got the opportunity to be a team captain. Dylan McCaffrey is the emerging talent that has shown that there is some playmaking ability there. Joe Milton is the up and comer that has all the whispers and has people talking about future greatness. And then Cade McNamara is your young gunslinger, set the Nevada passing record as a high school senior, but he's got some time now as an early enrollee to boot where he can be groomed. So we think there will be 4 quarterbacks on the roster when camp opens up. At running back, right now, we think there will be 5. And we always have these done in the order of their class eligibility for this season. So we think True Wilson, the former walk-on, Michael Barrett, Hassan Haskins, Christian Turner, and Zach Charbonnet. When you look at this group, notice Chris Evans is not there. I just think it's more likely than not Chris Evans won't play football for Michigan this year. I wouldn't say it's definite or anything, but with an academic situation, especially when it's come to the point of suspension, I think that you're better off just anticipating the worst. And then if he's there for the start of camp, great. When you look at this particular group, you have True Wilson. He's a good, steady player. I don't think he's a bell cow, though. Michael Barrett was a prolific running quarterback in the Georgia high school ranks. I could see him being moved to this position. I think someone's getting moved to this position because there's a lack of depth, obviously, and I think he's a good candidate. Hassan Haskins is a guy that a few people like Isaiah Hole at Wolverines Wire and some other places are saying they're hearing from team sources might be overall the most talented back that was in the program last year. Christian Turner is another redshirt freshman that the coaches showed us in the bowl game. They're really high on. And then Zach Charbonnet is the highest ranked running back recruit that Jim Harbaugh has signed so far. And he is also an early enrollee, so he is already on campus. So we're projecting 5 running backs. At fullback, we have 2 players there. Ben Mason, of course, is the proven commodity, although there's some talk that Ben Van Summeren may be moved to linebacker this spring. We shall see. This is a position that I think you're going to see devalued in Josh Gaddis's offensive scheme, which means I could even see some scenarios where maybe Ben Mason is put in the backfield, not just as a short yardage guy, but even as an actual running back. When you go to wide receiver, this is a really deep, talented group. We've got 11 players right now that we think will be on scholarship when camp opens later this summer at wide receiver. Brendan White, a former walk-on who was just granted a scholarship. And then you look at those next 3 guys, Nico Collins, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Tariq Black. I mean, that looks like the receiver line at the NFL Scouting Combine. I mean, those guys are all future pros. Do not sleep on Oliver Martin, former 4-star prospect out of the state of Iowa. He has flashed when given opportunities. Ronnie Bell's a guy that we saw, despite having no recruiting ranking, make some plays last year as a true freshman. He's only going to get better. And then you look at this year's incoming crop. Giles Jackson, George Johnson, and Mike Sanderstill are quintessential slot players, the kind of players Michigan has really not recruited up until now under Harbaugh that should thrive in new coordinator Josh Gaddis's offense. Cornelius Johnson is cut from the same cloth of the Nico Collins, Donovan Peoples-Jones, and Tariq Black. He is your classic prototypical NFL outside receiver body, likely looking at a redshirt this coming season. So we have 11 receivers. At tight end, we see 5 players coming to camp on scholarship right now. Sean McCune, who needs to bounce back from what was a subpar 2018 after he was a bit of a revelation in 2017. Nick Eubanks, who I think is criminally underutilized, is a very explosive player. I think you'll see him get down the field more under Josh Gaddis. Mustafa Muhammad might have been the most decorated recruit in the 2018 class. Luke Schoonmaker, a guy that was one of those under the radar types, but it's a tight end, and you have to trust the staff that this is a position they know how to develop and recruit. And then Eric All was one of the fastest rising tight end prospects in the country at the end of last year. My guess is he's a candidate for a redshirt this fall. On the offensive line, this is going to be finally the kind of depth Michigan has been trying to build with quality recruits for many, many years now, maybe more than a decade. So there's a lot of raw material here for Ed Warner to work with. And there you start with John Runyon and Ben Bredesen. Both of those guys are going to be on a lot of all Big Ten teams to open the year. I think Cesar Ruiz could end up being better than both of them. I think you'll see a battle for Michael Onwenu's spot, particularly depending on what we see out of his weight throughout the course of the offseason. Steven Spinellis is your utility player there. Chuck Filiaga, former decorated recruit, Joel Honingford, Andrew Stuber. These are all guys, and we saw Stuber last year at the end, remember, when Juwan Bushell-Beatty got hurt. These are all guys that in the recent years we've had to rush into playing time because we just didn't have the numbers here that we are allowing to develop at more of a traditional pace. And then you look at the youngsters. Ryan Hayes and Jalen Mayfield were 2 of the higher ranked recruits in the 2018 class. And then here in 2019, Carson Barhart, Zach Carpenter, Trent Jones, who blew up during the All-Star games last month. Nolan Rumler is a guy that if we had a need might be ready to play right away. Jack Stewart and Trevor Keegan, a very highly recruited tackle prospect out of Illinois. That's one of the best offensive line hauls that anybody recruited in 2019. So we've got 16 guys here, plenty of depth, plenty of opportunity for development, but also more importantly, competition. So Ed Warner has a lot to work with there. On the defensive line, there's this perception that Michigan's really down here. The numbers are actually pretty good. There's 13 defensive linemen here. The problem is there's just a lot of unknowns, a lot of guys that the new defensive line coach Sean Nua is going to have to develop. So we have Michael Dana, that was just added today. He is the grad transfer from Central Michigan. He was first team All MAC for the Chippewas last year with 8.5 sacks and 14 tackles for loss. Now, if you look at Central Michigan's schedule, a lot of that was against the weaker teams that they played. So I don't know that you would expect him to be a major contributor. At the very least, though, that is some much needed depth. Michael Dwumfor was phenomenal at times last year. Carlo Kemp really came on after being moved inside. Kwity Paye's a guy that to me, I think he is a future star. Donovan Jeter is going to be a guy Michigan needs a lot. Former huge recruit that has been injured, but they need depth at the defensive tackle position. Luigi Valine is another guy. He was a top 100 national recruit, and he's had back-to-back knee injuries, and they're hoping he's ready to go now in his third year in the program. Aiden Hutchinson is a guy that got to playing time. If Mustafa Muhammad wasn't the top-rated recruit in 2018, he was, and we saw him some last year. Taylor Upshaw, Julius Welshoff, these are developmental prospects that are redshirt freshmen. And then you look at this year's incoming class, Chris Hinton, 5-star according to Rivals, high 4-star according to 24/7. Mike Morris, who flipped from Florida State, Gabe Newberg out of Ohio. David Ojabo is a player I love. That's a guy with every measurable you can imagine. Originally from Scotland, just really raw, but a year or two from now, I could see him being a monster. And Mozzie Smith was another guy that really blew up during the All-Star game practices. Him and Chris Hinton. Mozzie Smith is already on campus. Chris Hinton is coming in the fall, but they're going to have college-ready bodies, and they're going to be needed to provide depth on the defensive interior. So we are projecting 14 defensive linemen go to camp with the Wolverines in July. At linebacker, now, the numbers here are low. Keep in mind that hybrid position at Viper kind of skews these a little bit, okay? So Michigan only plays, quote-unquote, 2 linebacker positions most of the time, sometimes 3. So having 7 guys there means you're 2 deep at every position. Josh Uche led Michigan in sacks last year. Devin Gill's a guy that they're going to ask a lot of. Josh Ross is a player we've seen a lot of and at times has looked really good. Jordan Anthony came to school with some knee injury issues, but was one of the most highly decorated linebacker recruits in the country a couple of years ago. Cameron McGrone, according to 24/7, was the number 1 inside linebacker prospect in the class of 2018. And then Anthony Solomon, a Miami flip, and Charles Thomas, who has seemingly been committed, a former IMG Academy prospect. He's been committed to Michigan forever. That's your depth chart at linebacker there. There's a lot of speed and athleticism in that group. When you look at the Vipers, right now we have 4. So Kalique Hudson is your absolute starter, and he had a down 2018. A lot of it, targeting ejections. It just seemed like he was driving with the brake on all year long, but he had All-American numbers in 2017. I love Quinton Johnson along with David Ojabo, another one of my favorite recruits in the 2019 class. This guy's measurables, spark ratings are just absolutely off the charts. I think he'll be greatly enhanced with the development he'll get at Michigan. Joey Velasquez out of Ohio is kind of your quintessential Don Brown recruit. And then you'll notice the name Jalen Kelly Powell. They're not going to go into a year with Kalique Hudson and then just freshmen backing him up. Somebody's getting moved over here. Now, Jalen Kelly Powell is a former big-time recruit out of Detroit. He's just struggled with injuries, and he's kind of a tweener. And that, to me, would make him a prospect for potentially being moved to the backup Viper position here opposite Kalique Hudson. And then finally, you go to defensive back. We have 15 Michigan defensive backs right now. Louis Grodman is another walk-on that was just given a scholarship. Lavert Hill, Josh Metellus, those two guys are going to get some preseason All-American mention. Ambree Thomas, this is his turn now. He's been one of the fastest guys on the team the last couple of years, one of the highest-rated cornerback prospects I think they've signed under Jim Harbaugh. He's been waiting behind Lavert Hill and David Long. Long is now gone. It's his time. Jamerick Woods is a guy we saw play more and more minutes and snaps at safety at the end of last year. Benjamin St. Juste is a guy, big-time prospect out of Canada, really flashed. He was an early enrollee, flashed his first spring practice, and then he's been battling injuries and other issues. So that's a guy they would like to see a lot more from this year. Vincent Gray was a guy that we saw the coaches play more his true freshman year. And then you're looking at red shirts. Sammy Faustin's a guy that flashed during bowl practices. Jemin and German Green, the brothers there, Miles Sims, another one of the higher-ranked prospects in the 2018 class. Jalen Perry, the flip from Georgia. DJ Turner is another guy that's been committed to Michigan forever. And there you see Daxton Hill, the most celebrated safety prospect that Michigan has signed in quite some time. So if you look at Coach Mike Zordich's track record here at defensive back, and you look at what Michigan's traditionally been able to put together, and you look at all that raw material there, you have to believe the Wolverines are going to come out of this with another really good secondary. And, they've been a pretty much a perennial, top 10 team in pass efficiency defense for several years now. That leaves 3 more spots for scholarships. Those would be your specialists. And I think, now this is where there could be some finagling of the scholarship situation. Right now, I have Will Hart and Jake Moody on scholarship based on their performances last year. And they're a big reason why ESPN's FPI ranks Michigan special teams #1 in the country heading into 2019. And there you see Quinn Nordine as well, who, like Kalique Hudson, had almost all-American type of numbers in 2017 and then really fell off in 2018. So will all 3 of these guys be on scholarship? Will they ask 1 or 2 of them to remain a walk-on? Will they go to camp with both kickers on scholarship there? Those are questions that could be finagled and finessed, because right now with the lineup we just presented you, Michigan would be at 86 scholarships. And now let me stop right here for a second. You guys are going to go in the comments section, and I appreciate it. And you're going to say, well, what about blank? Why isn't he here? What about blank? Why isn't he here? We're not into I'm not really big with, particularly when you're dealing with young men, that guy should be gone, or that guy should transfer. So we're going to kind of do this passive aggressively to try to be respectful if we can, which is, rather than telling you these are the guys we don't think will be here, we're going to focus on the guys that we think will be, and then you can kind of do the mental math and figure it out from there. So with the lineup we just gave you, that would put Michigan at 86 scholarships for July. And they'd have to be down to 85 at the start of camp. So we're also talking maybe about adding another 1 or 2 potential grad transfers, maybe at running back, maybe the interior of the defensive line. So that's where on those special team slots, you could see maybe 1 or 2 of those guys asked to be a walk-on 1 more year. And then I think you could look at the defensive back position. And, we have some guys coming off of injuries and things of that nature that they'd like to be there, but maybe get medicals to open up a scholarship or 2. But right now, with some minor tweaking, they're pretty close to being at 85 right now. So this roster is in really good shape. And it's maybe, I think not maybe, it is. I think this is the deepest roster that Jim Harbaugh has had so far at Michigan. It's not as star-studded, but I think the overall depth is the best that he's had, the best we've had in a long time. And you're starting to now, as we get full bore into his recruiting efforts and the way they develop players here, you're starting to see it pay off. All that's left to do, well, I don't have to tell you, it's that 4th Saturday in November. Thank you to all of you that are supporting us here on Patreon. We get asked frequently, hey, what can we do to support what you guys are doing here at Michigan Podcast? And one of the best ways to do that is to support us with a very inexpensive nominal contribution at Patreon. And as you can see, throughout the course of the year for our Patreon supporters, we do give you exclusive content we don't offer anywhere else, just as a way of saying thank you. So to all of you that have supported us throughout the year at Patreon, thank you. Thank you in advance to those of you who are willing to sign up and do so in the future, and go Blue. All right, back here on Michigan Podcast, and we are joined by our good friend Michael Spath from WTKA in Ann Arbor and Wolverine Digest. We're going to talk some basketball here. Michael, you ready to go, brother?
Absolutely, guys. Looking forward to it.
All right. Always good to see you. So I've got a collection of thoughts coming out of the game against Maryland and looking ahead to the rest of the season. I kind of want to get your take on each of these. Let's start with Jordan Poole. So you and I sat here last Tuesday talking about some concerns about his shot selection. And then I thought he took it to a whole new level of not even crossing the line, but like pole vaulting past it against Penn State. I wrote a column about it at Wolverine Digest, pointing out why I think his shot selection could be the ultimate decider of where this team goes. And then lo and behold, he comes out after really he's been kind of doing the hero ball thing for a couple of weeks. I thought he played his most contained game in quite a while against Maryland. There were two possessions in particular, one in late in the first half when Matthews and Simpson were on the bench with foul trouble. Maryland's making a run. And then he did it again in the second half when Maryland was making a run, where he didn't take a couple of extra dribbles and force up a shot, but he made a pass that led to a key basket for a teammate. I thought he let the game come to him more, and I think he's going to need to do that more for this team down the stretch, Michael.
No, I mean, you're spot on there. I would love to say that what we saw in the Maryland game was a sign of maturation, that Jordan Poole has turned a corner and has become a player that Michigan can count on not to take the outrageous shot and to play within himself. But, I think I'm always a big fan of, are things aberrations or are they trends? And I think it's too early to say it was a trend. Might just have been an aberration, because what we've seen out of Jordan Poole is a guy that does play a little too much hero ball and certainly hunts his shots and takes a lot of really awkward and poor shots, especially from the three-point land.
Right.
The game against Penn State, I mean, they're down 4 points, as we discussed. And, I mean, that was the turning point in that game, was down 4. He comes down and jacks like a NBA-level three-pointer that misses everything. And then, takes another three-pointer possession later, and a 4-point game became a 9-point game. And so, I've discussed this ad nauseum on our show a little bit, but you got to take the good with the bad with Jordan Poole because of two reasons. One, his good is spectacular. His swagger, the way that he won't back down from opponents, is exactly the type of thing that Michigan can use to fuel itself for, in big games against Michigan State, in the Big Ten tournament when they play Purdue or Wisconsin again, or Michigan State, and in the NCAA tournament. I mean, he gives them that type of edge. At the same time, I mean, he can be and the other reason that he has to play is because they just don't have anybody else coming off the bench. Adrian Nunez isn't ready yet. David DeJulius, if they wanted to put him in a 2 position, I mean, he's not ready for that. So they don't really have any other options. But the flip side is that he does take a lot of really bad shots. I could see a game where you get in the NCAA tournament and you're in like the Sweet 16 or the Elite 8, and Jordan Poole is doing what he did against Penn State, and you and I are sitting here coming in on Monday morning and going, the reason they lost that game was because Jordan Poole was just all over the place and didn't cede the lead role to the guys like Charles Matthews and Xavier Simpson that are a little more contained in that role. And so we're just going to have to live and die with it as Michigan fans. It's kind of like this basketball team this year. I mean, there's just no proven commodity game in and game out. And so we're kind of like every game going like, okay, Michigan, 75% chance they could win this one, 25% chance they could lose, depending on these factors. And it's been an interesting basketball season. Certainly you can't complain about the 3 losses and being 22-3, but it in some ways doesn't feel like they're 22-3 just because of the way that they're winning their games with defense, without prolific scoring, without putting teams away until the very end. I'm sure if you ask, I mean, everybody's enjoying this basketball season, but let's face it, we're picky as fans, and we think we could be enjoying it a little bit more if they were making it a little bit easier on us.
And I don't have a problem with him attacking the basket. I don't have a problem in putting his head down and attacking the basket, because he does that. 3 things are going to happen: a conversion, a foul, and he's an 80% free throw shooter, or a turnover there on a bad shot is not nearly as damaging as it is 25 feet from the basket. I watched James Harden highlights last night, so let me do some chuck and duck, from 26 feet. No, hell to the no on that. Okay. I don't have a problem. I almost don't care what shot he takes inside the lane. I don't have a problem how often he wants to attack the lane. I think he's actually our most gifted overall offensive player in terms of his comprehensive skill set. It's the stuff out there beyond the 3-point arc where we're dribbling more than 2 or 3 times. That's the stuff I just want to hit the eject on all of that.
Well, I'm sure John Beilein wants to hit it too, but as we're talking, I mean, again, it's the good and bad of Jordan Poole. It's a Jekyll and Hyde. I mean, he's really 2 faces, right? And you can't. I would say this: I don't think I've seen a game yet this year. Maryland might be the closest where you only saw Jekyll or Hyde. Which one's the good one? I don't remember.
Yeah, I hear you.
Sure.
Yeah.
But it's essentially like you have to take good and bad every single game. And so there's a funny story that Sam Webb told last week about Darius Morris of Michigan. He said that when Darius Morris was at Michigan, there used to be 3 or 4 things at the game that John Beilein would like pull out his hair with. And so his assistant coaches said to him, look, that's just who Darius Morris is he's going to do some crazy things. So you have to give him 3 freebies. Every game he's going to do 3 things that are going to drive you insane, and you just check them off their list. And anything after 3, you can just take him to task on. But the 3, you leave him alone on. And I think that's where we are with Jordan Poole as fans, and probably John Beilein is Steve, you and I watch it, and I'm gonna start doing that from now on. I'm going to give him 3 freebies a game, 3 freebies a game. And then anything after the 3 is when I'm going to cuss a storm up with Jordan Poole's name probably in part of that cuss storm. So
let's talk about Michigan's defense. Maryland came into this game 16th in KenPom in offensive efficiency. Michigan put on such a dominant defensive performance against them. They fell to 22 based off of that game alone. They had 0.8. This is courtesy of your partner, Zach Shaw, there on WTKA. They had 0.839 points per possession, 52 points for the game, 41.8% shooting. Those are all season lows for a top 25 team. Another outstanding performance on the defensive end by the Wolverines.
Let me ask you a question, because this is something we talked about on my show today on Tuesday, and it's something that I'm trying to wrap my head around as a Michigan basketball fan. Is John Beilein has always been about offense,
mm-hmm.
and the 3-point shooters, Duncan Robinson and Zach Irvin and Trey Burke and Tim Hardaway, Nick Stauskas and Glenn Robinson III even can shoot the 3, and all these guys can shoot the 3. And so we got so used to his success being predicated on the ability to shoot the 3-pointer. And then he preached defense, but he wasn't very good. The team wasn't very good at defense and wasn't very good at defensive rebounding. And so we just kind of said, like, okay, we're going to win these games. Michigan's going to win these games a certain style. And from 2011, 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, up until probably 2017, they won with that style. And now all of a sudden, it's like if Michigan football became a prolific offensive scoring team this past year, which we were all kind of hoping on. But really what we were used to was that the last, under Harbaugh, they've been really good defensive teams. And they've won essentially with defense. So imagine in another example, imagine the 1997 Michigan National Championship football team, and they played Washington State, and they beat Washington State 45-42. Like, we would all been like, what's going on here? Like, what do we do with this?
Right.
And that's what this Michigan defense is challenging us right now as fans, is they're winning basketball games in a much different way than we've become accustomed to as Michigan basketball fans. And so how do we make sense of that? How do we make peace with it? Do we make peace with it? Again, it's a game like you saw against Maryland, 65-52. 52 points Maryland scored, and that's a hell of a performance. It's just not as celebrated as if Michigan were to go out there and win. If Michigan won that game 85 in the same margin of difference, 85-72, we don't be talking about what a great performance Michigan did and how dominant they were. Instead, we look at a 65-52 and go, oh man, something's wrong with this team because they just scored 65 points. And what we're overlooking is how amazing the defense has been consistently across the entire season. And so I'm starting to adjust to that as a fan, but I got to tell you, it's not easy to trade one way, which was all offense, for a different way, which is predicated on phenomenal smothering defense.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think one of the points that's getting mentioned, and I got into this on Twitter with Rick Pizzo at the Big Ten Network. This notion.
By the way, you're a little salty there with Rick Pizzo.
So you saw that. So this notion that Michigan's offense sucks. So last year, at the end of the year, Michigan finished number 3 on Ken Palm in defensive efficiency and 35th in offensive efficiency. Right now, they're number 2 in defensive efficiency, number 35 in offensive efficiency. So, they're not as prolific as we are accustomed to, but there's 353 teams in the sport. They've played a top 40 schedule. They're in the top 35 in offensive efficiency. They're not terrible. I think we have to recognize the complementary aspect of this, and that Michigan doesn't have the depth it had last year. I mean, you're bringing Mr. Basketball off the bench last year. You're bringing Jordan Poole off the bench last year. You're bringing Duncan Robinson off the bench last year. It doesn't have that kind of depth this year. And yet the defensive performance until the Iowa game, Michigan was trending to having the all-time defensive efficiency mark in the history of Ken Palm until the Iowa game. And so what that tells you is that that's going to come at a cost. And that cost is going to be probably your legs on deep perimeter shooting on the other end of the floor, because even these young men, after 2 or 3 Camp Sandersons, they're in the best shape. They're in the American Ninja Warrior kind of conditioning. There's still a point in time where humanity kicks in. All right. And so I think that's something that's not being discussed a lot, is that the trade-off of the balls to the wall defense you're seeing, no matter where we are and who we're against, the trade-off is the ebbs and the flows on the offensive end. And we saw this last season as well, where there'd be these ups and downs. They'd be really hot. They'd be really cold. 4 of their last 5 games, they've shot 27% or lower from 3. You know who else is a really terrible 3-point shooting team, by the way, far worse than Michigan? Duke. They're one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the country. But you have to keep in mind when you look at these stats that it seems really provocative to see Duke is 329th out of 353 teams in 3-point shooting. Okay, so they make 32.8%. And the number 1 team in the country makes 42.8%. Ask yourself this question. Over the course of 30-plus games, and all possessions in all 30-plus games, what will win more games? That extra 10% you are shooting from 3, or the offensive efficiency numbers that you're holding opponents to game in and game out? I think we both understand it would actually be the latter. What I think we're watching here is actually the next stage of evolution, Michael, that we saw from Coach B when Trey Burke came in. And, he kind of came in with this thick playbook and, the whole, did he have a modified Princeton offense? And a lot of that was overblown. But he kind of had his way of doing things. And all of a sudden now he gets the kind of point guard that when the shot clock gets down to 5 seconds can go 1-4 set at the top of the key, play a 2-man game and get a good shot for himself or somebody else. And he kind of abandons that, that offensive playbook and lets Trey Burke do the stuff he never let Manny Harris do. He evolved. All right. This is the next step in the evolution, which is he's got drivers and finishers that some of the guys you mentioned who were better shooters couldn't drive and finish the way several guys on the team the last couple of years could. And so I don't know that it's so much of a defensive evolution as much as the defensive evolution is the next step in John Beilein's evolution, which is his willingness. It's kind of funny. Harbaugh came in with the persona and the ruthlessness and the social media stuff. And John Beilein's the nice Catholic Jesuit educated boy who goes to mass and everybody loves him. But if you look at it, their approach on game days, Beilein is far more cutthroat than Harbaugh. He will win any way he has to win. If we have to win throwing up making 12 threes, we will. If we have to win holding the other team to 51 points, we will. He's the guy that's actually abandoned whole cloth the system he came to Ann Arbor with to do whatever the hell it takes to win on game day. And I think you're starting to see Harbaugh do that a little bit, but I think this defensive persona, we recruit a bunch of guys that are more of your wing skilled guys that he's had in the past. Don't be shocked if we go back to being a top 15 offensive efficiency team and like a top 30, top 40 defensive efficiency team, because he's amorphous now. He is molding to what and evolving to what the collection of players he has are the best at, rather than trying to fit them into his particular system.
God, that sounds like genius coaching, does it not?
It does, yeah.
No square peg, round holes. It's just, hey, we have square pegs. Guess what? I'm going to go out and buy myself a square peg holder. I like what you're saying. I appreciate what you're saying. And if he wins this way, if he wins the Big Ten regular season title, if he gets to, at least the semifinals of the Big Ten tournament, if he makes it to the Sweet 16 and beyond that, and hopefully the Elite Eight, then all of us are going to look back and go like, yeah, what an incredible, job, adapting to styles of play by John Beilein and this team this year. I think what makes me nervous, and probably a lot of Michigan fans nervous, is we have the recency bias of a great football season, which was predicated almost entirely on an awesome defense and an offense that didn't make mistakes, but an offense that, when push came to shove and needed to step up and be the team that be the side of the ball that carried Michigan, couldn't do that. And I think what makes me nervous, Steve, is that when you get into that second weekend of the NCAA tournament and beyond that, is you're going to run into what happens if you run into a team like Iowa that was shooting lights out against Michigan? What happens if you run into a team that hits 8 to 10 to 12 3-pointers in the game? Is Michigan going to be able to keep up with that? And but the funny thing is that they may never run into that scenario, but we're nervous about that scenario because we saw it unfold on the football field earlier this year.
Right.
But to your point about John Beilein, I mean, you're right. Like, this is a guy that in his time here at Michigan, more than 10 years now, I mean, he has adapted to his personnel better than any coach that I've seen maybe in college basketball. And certainly he makes it easy to be a Michigan fan, because that every single year, I mean, he talks about this all the time about maximizing each individual and each team's potential, whatever that particular means for that particular team and for those guys. And so if he has a Nick Stauskas and he has a Duncan Robinson and he has some great 3-point shooters, he's going to be more of a 3-point shooting team. And if he's got someone like John Teske, who, for all his limitations offensively in terms of he has no back to the basket game, he's good around the hoop, but a lot of times he doesn't dunk when he drives us crazy. He can step out and hit a 3, but he's not consistent in doing so. But what does John Teske do really, really well? And that's play, pretty lock solid defense down low and frustrating the hell out of these big men. And so what's he done? He's turned this team into a defensive-minded team with guys like Xavier Simpson and Charles Matthews. I mean, if you were to look at the 3 best players on Michigan, and if those were the 3 best guys, and you said, what's the best thing about them? All 3 of them, you would say they're great defenders. And so what is this team built on? Being a great defensive team.
You know who they remind me of, this team? They remind me of the Pistons from our childhood. Teske is your Lambeer. Not really a guy who plays good defense, rebounds, not a back to the basket player, and more of a threat from 15 feet and on a pick and pop than he is, on the block. Those Pistons teams, their best post player was actually either Mark Aguirre or Adrian Dantley. You kind of see a combination of that. Charles Matthews kind of has the pull-up game of an Adrian Dantley, and then you see that Iggy Brazdeikis kind of has the head down, drive to the basket and finish game of a Mark Aguirre. Xavier Simpson's kind of a cross between what Isaiah Thomas had with the crossover dribble. He's got that with the sky hook, but he's got the Joe Dumars persona at the exact same time. Jordan Poole is your Vinnie Johnson. There's a lot of similarities to this team. To what those Pistons teams had back in the day. Before we let you go, I want to throw a couple of numbers at you. And the 3-point scenario you're mentioning can happen to anybody in college basketball.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the team we're playing Thursday, Minnesota. All right, this is one of the worst shooting teams in the country. They shot 55% from 3 against Indiana, made 12 threes. By far, their biggest performance. I thought all along we were going to lose this game because it's the classic sandwich letdown game. And now I think we're going to win. And you know why I think we're going to win? Because we're one of the best 3-point defensive teams in the country. What are the odds they're going to come anywhere close to shooting 55% 2 games in a row?
Very good.
Not very good. Now we aren't a great 3-point shooting team, but we're a hell of a lot better than 27%. Okay, so at some point we're going to have a game where 8 or 9 of those go in. So a couple of points I want to get your take on. Let's start with Xavier Simpson. All right. No turnovers in the second half. Michigan had no turnovers as a team in the second half against Maryland. He's made 16 of his last 17 free throws. His free throw percentage was 51% last year. It's 64% right now. And then if you look at what Michigan's accomplished, 7-3 so far this year against quad 1 teams. 10 of their last 11 they've won against AP ranked teams. They have the third most quad one wins in the sport, and it's funny too because I'm listening to a lot of national shows, and they're poo-pooing us all over the place. And I keep looking at our resume and stacking it up against almost every other team in the country, and it's kind of right there. So when you see those numbers, your thoughts are what?
Well, something I said earlier is that they're 22-3, but it doesn't feel like 22-3. You just rattled off all those numbers. Now I think to myself, that kind of feels like 22-3. So I think at the end of the day, it's human for all of us to kind of look at this, look at the season and ask like where it could go wrong or why has it not been more dominant? But what you just said, it has been dominant. It has been a lot of fun. And we should just sit back, relax, and enjoy it a little bit more. And whatever happens, happens. I mean, we got a great week ahead of us. Minnesota on Thursday, Michigan State on Sunday. Another battle with Maryland next week, and then Michigan State. And this is the point of the year when it's time to stop analyzing every little thing, which I happen to do on my show daily, and just kind of sit back and enjoy and have some fun with it. Because this team has been great fun, and there's really no reason to think that they're not going to continue to give us great experience and great memories here going forward.
Michael Spath, a good friend from WTKA there in Ann Arbor. Good to see you, brother. Thanks for joining us this week on Michigan Podcast.
Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it. And, every time we do this, I'm like somewhere else. And right now I'm sitting in the bar at Weber's Hotel. And I don't know what the art is behind me, but it's way fancier than what I normally have behind me.
Is this the place with the fancy French toast you're always talking about?
No, I think that was up north, but this place has very good French toast and very good pancakes too. So
okay, all right. Yeah, I know you're bragging about that place's food all the time. All right, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll talk to you next week. Go Blue.
All right, thank you.
Take care. If you like what we do here, WolverineDigest.com is the website. We update it frequently with commentary. If you don't want to wait until Tuesday and when a new episode gets unveiled each week, keep updated each and every week at WolverineDigest.com. Both myself and Michael Spath from WTKA and Ann Arbor write commentary there each and every day. WolverineDigest.com. This week's Twitter poll results, we asked you, will Michigan sweep, split, or be swept by Sparty in the 2 regular season basketball games coming up? 61% of you still believe there's going to be a split, 1/3 of you a sweep. Only 6% of you say be swept. And yes, we took this poll following the announcement that Nick Ward, Michigan State's outstanding post player, has a hairline fracture in his hand and conceivably could be out the rest of the regular season. It's anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, it's looking like right now. So this poll was taken with that news in mind. Let's get to this week's question of the week. Corey Cole asks, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask your opinion concerning Michigan's defense this fall. We hear a lot about our depth and playmakers coming back on offense, but how do you think our defense will be? And how do you think Don Brown and our new coaching hires will be and the scheme? Well, on the new coaching hires, Anthony Campanelli, or is it Campanelli? Anyway, if you go listen to John Jansen's podcast, the most recent episode, he's got interviews with those new assistant coaches, and Campanelli, you're going to love him. Okay. I mean, that's just a dude. That's just another football dude. In terms of Michigan's overall defense, let me just say this. Since 2011, Michigan has finished lower than 16th nationally in total defense one time. Since 2011, and we've had 3 different defensive coordinators since then. Okay, so they're still going to be pretty good on defense. Now, the question is, will they have much like it is on offense, will their scheme be able to evolve when they run up against a team like, say, Ohio State, that they cannot play man against all over the field? Okay. But this is going to still be a very good defense. It may not be number 1, may not be number 3 like it has been the last few years. Maybe it'll be 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. That's still plenty good to win a Big Ten championship. So this is much more about the opening up of the offense and putting together an offense capable of being more of a big play unit so that the defense isn't asked to shut teams down each and every week. Want to ask want to thank our friends at Detroit Sports Podcast and all of you for helping to support this podcast and spreading it far and wide. We're approaching 5,000 subscribers here in our humble little YouTube channel. Would you be kind enough, if you haven't yet subscribed, to help us cross over that threshold as soon as possible? Give us a like there on YouTube as well if you like what we do. Give us 5-star reviews if you like what we do on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, etc. Thanks to all of you for tuning in here another week. I'm Steve Deace. Go Blue.